the Generational Awakening YouTube channel. Our aim is to encourage, equip, and empower Christian leaders and parents to effectively nurture the next generation, become resilient, lifelong disciples of Jesus. Today, we welcome our special guest, Mark Arnold. Mark is the Additional Needs Ministry Director at a leading national Christian children's and youth organization, Urban Saints, and is co-founder of the Additional Needs Alliance, a vibrant and fast-growing online community. He is an enthusiastic national and international advocate and ally for children and youth with additional needs or special needs or disabilities. Mark is a Churches for All Disabled Children's Partnership and Living Fully Network partner, and a member of the Council for Disabled Children and the European Disability Network. He blogs as the national award-winning The Additional Needs Blogfather, and writes a monthly Additional Needs column for Premier's Youth and Children's Work magazine, as well as for other publications in the UK, in Europe, and in the USA. Mark is father to James, who is autistic and has associated learning difficulties, anxiety, and epilepsy. Welcome, Mark. Thank you for joining us today to talk about how we can be all-inclusive in our churches.
Thank you, Harry, and great to be here with you. Hello to everyone, and yeah, really looking forward to our time together today.
Well, thank you. Well, could you begin by telling us what do you mean when we talk about children and young people with additional needs? What is the big picture? What is the big picture for this in 2023?
Really important question, because often this is an area that slips under the radar a bit. It can be something that people miss understanding about, and so yeah, painting that big picture right at the beginning is helpful. Now we're talking about this term additional needs, and some people may have heard that, some people may not have heard that, but it's a broad catch-all category that includes disabilities, health conditions, a whole range of things. That means that children and young people need extra support to be able to engage with things with their peers and to learn together and explore the world together. In different places, it's called additional support needs or additional learning needs. Those are helpful phrases for us as well. So yeah, really big area for us to think about. And I've actually got some info that really sort of paints that bigger picture through sometimes some quite tough things for us to grapple with. So I'm just going to share my screen for a few moments so that we can explore a little bit of that together. When we're thinking about that world of children and young people and into young adulthood with additional needs, the first thing to say really is this is a big area for us. 20% of children and young people have an additional need of some kind. And so when you're looking at your church context, potentially 1 in 5 children and young people will have additional needs. And of course, they don't lose those additional needs when they hit their 18th birthday and become adults. And so many of our church congregations will have additional needs throughout life. And indeed, that number grows with age, illness, accident, in adulthood. But what we also know is that the majority of those families are disconnected from the church. They're outside of the church. Over 90% of them have no connection with church at all. And we know those families are struggling, and particularly over the last 3 years, they've been disproportionately struggling. We're Urban Saints members of the Disabled Children's Partnership, and research that they've done have shown that families of children with additional needs have struggled more than most over the last 3 years. So the need is great for the church to step up and fill that gap that has been left by massive reductions in respite provision and therapies and support, much longer waiting lists for diagnosis, a whole bunch of factors that have really made it a struggle for families in this area. And families feel excluded in lots of ways. They feel marginalized. They feel on the edges of society, and never more than ever has there been a need for the church to step up and get involved and help and reach out to those families. We know it hits their relationships. This stat from About Families shows us that 53% of families say having a young person with a disability causes some or major relationship difficulties and breakups. And this was a pre-pandemic figure. So we know that this has got worse over the last 3 years. And, there's a need for us to stand with families there and to help families to be able to navigate through life safely and to stay together because they're supported and loved. Poorer communities, more deprived communities, twice as likely to include families with young people with additional needs as well. So if you're reaching out to a more deprived community, then those figures will increase even more. And so many families tell us that their young people are bullied, perhaps 2.5 to 3 times the statistics for bullying generally, which is bad enough. Here we're seeing 60% of young people are victims of bullying, and not everybody admits to being a victim of bullying. So again, that's a figure that's much higher. So there's a real need here for the church to recognize the problems that families with children with additional needs are experiencing, and particularly have experienced over the last 3 years, and to try and step into to meet that need a bit more.
Indeed. Well, certainly, I've seen some of those things myself, and it really is a challenge for the church today, and but a great need that we can be stepping up to meet.
Absolutely. And we only need to look at the example that Jesus left for us. Jesus reached out to folk that were on the margins, that were often ignored by society, and that demographic today includes families of children with additional needs and disabilities. And so it's absolutely an imperative for us to reach out to those families and to say, hey, we're here for you. You may be struggling through lack of support in other areas. The secular world may have let you down, but we're here to step into that gap, to journey with you, to show you love, show you support, and meet the needs that you've got, and to as we do that, introduce you to our amazing Saviour who loves you and cares for you and wants to transform your lives as well. Absolutely.
Well, you've given some examples of the challenges that families and young people experience just in society in general, but even within the church. Can you give us some examples of the challenges and barriers that children and youth with additional needs experience within the church today?
Yeah, there can be all kinds of barriers that children and young people can experience, and their families can experience, both inside the church and outside the church. Those barriers can be similar. I've got a great little video that helps to illustrate some of the challenges that families can experience, and then a story that helps to land that in a church context as well. So I'm just going to share my screen again to show that video clip, and then in the video clip we're going to see Lynette and her son Kieran, who's now a young adult, but they share in this 60-second video just a few thoughts about the challenges that they've experienced. And there's a really important message that Kieran gives us at the end, and that will lead us into the little story about another young person that might help to illustrate how still today families can experience some real challenges even in a church context as well.
As a mum, inclusion for me is really important. If we look at the Bible, Jesus included everybody, and quite often it was the ones that were on the edges of society. So it would be the women, the children, the disabled and the sick.
My name's Kieran. That's kind of as far as I'd ever go. Someone with Asperger's syndrome is someone on the autistic spectrum they might still struggle socially or emotionally with their day-to-day life and just need that extra support.
Outside of church, my son has been ignored a lot when he was at school. He would be the last person that would be included with anything or to be asked to parties or anything. Those invitations rarely came.
We're just like anyone else. We want to be a part of everything that's going on. Let us.
But that's not always the case. Let me just share for a few moments about Martin and some of what he experienced. So Martin came with his mum to my home church in Bournemouth on the south coast of England a few years ago. And when they arrived, it was our church club night for our young people. I was on the door greeting the young people as they arrived, saying hello to a few of the adults that were dropping them off. And when Martin and his mum came down the pathway towards me, I didn't recognize them. I hadn't seen them in church, hadn't seen them in the community around, but I sensed a really powerful story was coming with them. And when they reached me, Martin's mum said, "This club that you run, is it open to any young people, or, is it just for church young people?" And I said, everybody is welcome, and shared some of the things that we did. And I could see she was building herself up to something more. And suddenly out it came. She says, "Only Martin has ADHD." So ADHD is attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and it's a condition that perhaps 1 in 10 children and young people can experience. So Martin has ADHD, and his mum went on to share about how they tried to get Martin into other youth clubs, but some of them had said no. They'd said no because they didn't have enough volunteers, or the volunteers weren't trained in how to support young people with additional needs. Or on one occasion, they were told that Martin might be a health and safety risk to the other young people and leaders, and therefore he wouldn't be able to join. And it broke me, absolutely broke me, to listen to Martin's mum sharing these stories with me. And 90% of my attention was absolutely wrapped up in what she was telling me. And if you're wondering what the other 10% was doing, well, that was being horribly distracted by the absolute carnage that was going on in the room behind me. The young people climbing the walls and blood-curdling screams. And it was one particular scream that made me look around to see what on earth was going on. I feared that somebody had just died. It was such a scream. That's when Martin's mum asked me the question, would Martin be able to come here? And as I was looking behind me, I noticed several other young people that we were journeying with who, like Martin, have ADHD or are autistic, or have a whole range of other different additional needs and differences and diversities. And I really sensed God whispering in my ear and saying, there's room for one more, there's room for one more. And I look back at Martin and his mum, and what struck me when I looked back at them was the look on Martin's mum's face. It was blank. She was expecting another no. And yeah, that really touched me as well. And I was able to say to her, we would love for Martin to be a part of our group, and it would just be a privilege to include him. And as those words escaped from my mouth, another scream from behind me gave me the opportunity to add, and as you can see, he'll fit right in. And she laughed, and as she laughed, the light came back into her face, and the weight lifted from her shoulders. This stuff matters. You can see that in just that story of how this family had been turned away from place after place, and not every family is going to have the emotional strength to keep going like this one did. Many will get pushed back once or pushed back twice, and that'll be all they can do. But Martin's mum kept going with Martin, and they found a home for Martin to join, and it was a privilege to do that.
Thank you, Mark. That's a very powerful story.
It is. It's just, it's a story that, all this time later, I can't tell without getting quite emotional about it, and I can feel it welling up inside me as I'm telling the story. And saying yes matters. It's a small word, but it has such big impact. And the impact it had on Martin and his mum, we got to know his family, we got to know his sister, we got to know, loads of their family and friends, because we created a space for Martin and said, you're welcome here, you're valued here, you belong here.
Well, what top tips have you got to help the church to make a transforming difference for children and youth with additional needs and their families?
And there's loads of things that we can do that answer that question. I've got a few, so I'm going to share my screen again in a moment just to talk through a few of the top tips, the ideas, the strategies that have proven to be really, really effective. There are many more with longer to spend on this. We can always add in more and more ideas, but I've picked a handful of ideas that time and time again have made a difference. So I'm going to dive back into show a few of those now. Probably of all the ideas that makes the biggest and most transforming difference, it's having somebody that owns this within particularly our children's and youth team. So having somebody who's an inclusion champion, or if we borrow from the education world, there's this role in schools called a SENCO, or a special educational needs coordinator. But whatever we call them, somebody who owns this, who makes sure that there's a focus on this, that it stays a priority for the church. Goodness only knows, the last 3 years particularly have been tough on church leaders, lots to adapt to, lots to change. So it's easy to see how some things can slip down the priority list if we're not careful. But having somebody as an inclusion champion can really, really make a transforming difference. I've got another story in a bit that helps to illustrate that and shows in the life of a young lad called Timmy how that transformed church for him. But I'll just share a few more thoughts first on other strategies and then come back to Timmy's story in a few moments. Building relationships with families and parents and carers seems an obvious point, but we often miss it. We often fail to ask the question about what's working at home, what's working at school, what ideas and strategies can we borrow that are already successful in those other areas of a young person's life. We tend to reinvent the wheel when there's already a really good one rolling along in those other areas, and there's usually some good tips and ideas that we can draw in from families to help us with that. And a great way of doing that is to use a tool called a one-page profile. It's a simple one-page sheet that asks typically 3 questions, like the ones that are on the screen here. What do people like and admire about me? That's a transforming question because it's a positive question. It's not asking, is there challenging behavior, or what can't your child do? It's actually saying, what do people like and admire about you? And that transforms the narrative and makes us think positively about ways to support a child. What makes me happy? If we know what makes them happy, then we can use that to help them to learn. I'll give you some examples of that in just a second. And then how I want to be supported. Gives them the opportunity in their own words to share with us ways in which we can support them best. And you can download loads of different versions of these one-page profiles from a website called Chef Kids. And the links there on the screen, chefkids.co.uk. There are a resources section there with loads of copies of one-page profiles, different styles for young children up to teenagers and young adults that you can use to learn more about everyone and to understand ways to support people better. And answering that, what makes me happy, what do they enjoy doing, you'll get 100 different responses to that. Here's 3. It could be jigsaws, it could be Lego, that's really popular, it could be Minecraft. So if it's Lego that you see on those one-page profiles, well, getting some brick Bibles, getting a box of Lego, starting to explore some of the brick Bible videos that are out there that are great at just telling the Bible stories through the medium of Lego, or Minecraft, Bible for Minecraft, as the Pixel Heart Bible YouTube channel. Pixel Heart Bible is great. It tells loads of Bible stories using Minecraft. There's an Easter one. Easter's only a few weeks away now, so maybe that would be something to look at. But it could be 101 other things. But using what they enjoy doing to help them learn gives them a gateway into the theme or the story or the topic that we're looking to explore through something that they really, really enjoy doing, and that equips them to succeed. Helping them to meet their sensory needs, having a fiddles box, so that when they have a need to fiddle with something, to help them to focus and to concentrate, which is a common thing for many children and young people, particularly for children and young people with additional needs. So having some fiddles or fidgets that can help them to just regain that sense of connection and focus and concentration can be really important too. Helping them to know what's going on now and next, having a visual timetable, pictures that help to illustrate the different parts of the session. In this case, this is one that my son James used, and there's a bit of Velcro down the middle, and he moves his photograph down each part of the program as he goes through it. Helps him to know what's happening now and what's happening next and what's happening later. Takes away a lot of the anxiety that not knowing that would bring, and that anxiety can then lead to him becoming overwhelmed and having a meltdown. And we all want to avoid that. I'll share in Timmy's story in just a moment a little bit of that. Maybe even having some one-to-ones or buddies, folk who will get alongside our children and young people with additional needs and support them. The folk on the screen, Alison, Ian and Rich, have all been one-to-one helpers and buddies for my son James, and do a wonderful job of making sure that he is included in church. One of them will be with him every time he's there, and will make sure that he is supported and able to engage with things and is included in everything that's going on. So having that little team of one-to-one helpers is important, and doing all of this with families. So one of the other mistakes we can sometimes make is to do inclusion unto people rather than with them, and it's really important that we do this with families, with the young people themselves, that we do this collaboratively, and then it works, and that we also make sure that all the team know what's going on and are able to support each child in the ways that we've arranged and set up with families as well. I'll finish answering this question by just sharing Timmy's story. I mentioned Timmy just now. So Timmy is 8, he's autistic, he's got learning difficulties and other additional needs, and he goes to a big city church where on Sunday at 10 o'clock they have a big service, and they serve all kinds of food and refreshments for people as they arrive. So you can get bacon sandwiches and sausage rolls and cake and tea and coffee and all kinds of things when you get to church. And so their entrance area just before 10 o'clock is absolutely full of people. And that would be when Timmy and his family would arrive at church, and they'd walk into a wall of people and noise and smells and bright lights, and Timmy would already be getting overwhelmed. And then they'd all be flowing through to the worship area, and Timmy would be jostled and bumped against as he and his family were swept along with everybody else. And for Timmy, that would be physically painful. He's got a real sensitivity to touch, so that would be hard for him as well. And then they'd get into the worship area, and it would just be overwhelmingly loud. The worship band would be wound up to 11. It would be incredibly hard for Timmy. Then they've got to try and find somewhere to sit, and that's always somewhere different, because you can't have the same seat every week. You just got to try and find somewhere. And Timmy craves routine and for things to be the same, and they never are. And then he gets to whatever seat they find, and Timmy's now got no idea what's going on. He doesn't know what's happening now or next, when he's going to be going to the children's group, what they're going to be doing when he gets there. And all of this journey from them arriving at church to this point now could often mean that Timmy would just collapse under the weight of all of this. He'd be completely overwhelmed and could often end up having a meltdown, which would be really hard for him and his family and for everyone. But the inclusion champion, remember I spoke about inclusion champions just now, the inclusion champion at this church spotted what was going on, got alongside Timmy and his family and said, let's figure out a better way for you to arrive at church. And so what happens now is Timmy and his family arrive just after 10 o'clock. They figured all this out together. They arrive just after 10 o'clock. There's still people to greet them. They can still get their refreshments when they arrive. They can take those with them into the worship area, and Timmy picks up some ear defenders on the way and puts those on to protect him from the loud noise. And they head to the seats that are reserved for them now every week, a place in church that Timmy chose because it's his favorite place to sit. And when he gets there, there's a visual timetable. You remember I showed a visual timetable just now. There's a visual timetable that helps Timmy to know what's going on now and what's happening next, and what when he's going to be going out to the children's team. And there's also some resources that the children's worker has left for Timmy, so that he can start to think about what they're going to be doing when he gets there. He likes colouring, so it might be a colouring or a word search, or one of the other things that Timmy likes to do that's themed around the topic they're going to look at when he gets into the children's group. And all of these things together have transformed church for Timmy and his family. He doesn't have meltdowns anymore. All the barriers that he experienced have been overcome. And the final really interesting thing about all of that is that all of those things that have been put in place that have made a huge difference for Timmy, none of them have made church an adverse place for anybody else. It has transformed things and made a big difference there too.
Well, that's a wonderful example of just how we can really just adapt and think, put ourselves in the place of the family and of the child, and think, well, what are some of the practical things we can do? So thank you for sharing that. Well, how do you help the church, wider church, on this journey to create belonging for everyone?
And I think it's so important that we go on that journey together, and that we also go on that journey with children and young people with additional needs and their families as well. So in a moment, I'll share some of the ways that churches can connect and go on that journey with us, and some of the things that we've got in place to help. But first of all, it's great to hear from the children and young people themselves. They always need to be at the heart of all that we're doing. So I think it's really important that we hear from them about ways that they want us to understand them better, and some things that we can do to make a difference for them. So I've got a video clip that I'm going to show. It's about a minute and a half or so, and it's actually a bunch of American school kids. But when you listen to these kids and see them, and they share with their teacher ways in which they want their teachers to know more about them and for their teachers to support them, everybody watching this will recognize children and young people that they know, and it will speak to them about them as well. So we'll start by hearing from these kids, and then I'll share a bit more about ways that churches can journey and some of the things that we can do to support them in that.
Dear teacher, I know it doesn't always seem like it, but I really do want to listen and learn.
It's just my brain is kind of different. So this is what I'd like you to know about me. I have to move, or I really can't pay attention.
Even though I'm not looking at you, I can still listen to what you're saying.
If you tell me, sit up straight, now I have to use all of my brain to do just that.
It makes me feel sad when you tell me to try harder, even though I've already tried as hard as I can.
I actually listen better when I'm rocking in my chair. When you give me a bunch of directions, I start to think I will never remember all of this. Sometimes my mom or dad ends up doing all of my homework. So here's how you could maybe help. Let me get up and move while I'm learning.
Let me look wherever I want when you talk to me.
Let me rock or slouch in my chair.
No matter what, please don't take away my recess. Give me hope I could do all by myself. Make directions very short.
Just ask me, what does your brain need right now?
And one more thing. My brain might be different than yours, but it's still amazing.
Sincerely, your student.
Your student.
Your student. Your student.
Great kids, aren't they? And yeah, wonderful what they share with us, and the things that can be absolutely transforming that they've shared with us there. You know, creating content that a child or young person can do for themselves, meeting their needs by if they need to get up and move around or rock on their chair, then that's fine. Breaking things up into bite-sized chunks, all of those things that can really, really transform church for them. Lots of ways that the things I do are supporting churches to make a transforming difference in this area. So a few of the bits and pieces that we've seen so far form part of a series of training that we do, and you can find out more about what we do at Urban Saints in this additional needs space, all the resources that we offer, and the training we provide, and the consultancy that we deliver through the link on the screen there, urbansaints.org/additional needs. So there's a wealth of content there that can be really, really helpful for churches and to help churches go on this journey with families to make a real transforming difference for children and young people with additional needs. I'm also co-founder with my friend Kay Morgan Gurr of the Additional Needs Alliance, and the Additional Needs Alliance is a collaboration of several thousand of us who journey together as children's workers, youth workers, families workers, church leaders, practitioners, parents and carers, folk who are passionate about making a difference for children and young people with additional needs. And there's a website which you can see there, but also a Facebook group. And the Facebook group is a lively place where people ask questions, share resources, signpost towards training and other things that are being offered out to help churches to transform how church is offered to families with children and young people with additional needs, to make it a place where everyone belongs, where everyone's valued. So if you use Facebook, then come and join the Facebook group. If you visit the website, you'll find all sorts of resources that you can share there. I also write as the Additional Needs blog father, and there's a load of content there that's freely available. Stories, resources, there's even a theology area where you can look at what the Bible has to say about this topic. There's sections for youth and children's workers, for parents and carers, for anybody who's passionate about this topic, and lots of help and advice and information that you can get from there as well. And for dads of children and young people, young adults with additional needs and disabilities, I've put together something called the Dad's Fire Circle. The web link's on the page there as well, and it's a place where dads can gather. We tend to gather virtually these days because we've got folk from all over the world, but we will at some point also gather together in building somewhere, but a place where dads can just come and share their journey, share with other dads that get it, share with dads who are on the same journey as them, and to recognize that we're not alone. There are other dads out there that are parenting in a similar way, and we can support each other and help each other as well. So there's a bunch of things there that we can offer to the church to help churches on this journey to make a big difference for that 90+% of families that are out in our communities that we don't yet reach, and also that maybe 8%, 10% that are in our churches that we can do better for and help to really belong and be valued.
Wonderful. Well, you've shared some great stories as well about what churches are doing to really welcome and take care families. Do you have other examples of what it looks like when the church gets it right? And
Yeah,
do you find
I
it
mean,
means for children and youth with additional needs in their family?
it's great when churches get it right. And I have the privilege of going around and training churches and then seeing how those churches see their ministry generally and specifically in this area of children and young people and families where there are additional needs just take off and see wonderful things happen. So dipping back into my share screen for another picture here. So this is one example. This is Cathedral International Church in London. And these were the folk that came to a training session that we put on. What I absolutely loved about this group was they brought their kids with them. This was a training session about how to support children and young people with additional needs. And you can see that there are some kids there. There were more around as well. And it was just a wonderful time of training this team how to make a difference in their context, inspiring them to do that. And what I've seen and heard since is how this has taken off for them and how they have just been blessed by the growth in the number of families with children and young people with additional needs that are coming along. Families talk to each other. If a family finds a place that is inclusive and accessible and where their child is valued and loved, then they'll share that with other families that they know. And we're all looking for those places for our kids, and that word will spread and more families will come. And that's the experience that this church that I've just shown you has had, and many others. That's just one example of hundreds of churches that I've had the privilege of journeying with and training and seeing amazing things happen. I went to train a church that had 2 children with additional needs that they wanted to support better. And so I did some training for them. This was a church in St Albans, just north of London. And I bumped into their children's worker a couple of years later and was having a conversation with her about how was it going. And she reminded me of the 2 children that they'd been supporting or wanting to support better when I came to do the training. And she updated me by saying that they now support 22 children and their families. It had grown over 10-fold, 11-fold in that 2-year period, and was continuing to grow. And they were just blown away by the blessing that brought to the whole church. Those families that were coming in were an absolute blessing to everyone. And it had totally transformed church in wonderful ways for them as a whole. Great to see and great to hear those stories.
Beautiful. Well, that's really the expression of loving each other as Jesus loved us, and we're sharing that love with others in such a real practical way.
Absolutely. When those families brought their children to meet Jesus, that well-known story, and the disciples tried to stop them, and Jesus said, no, let the children come to me. The kingdom of God belongs to such as these. He didn't go on to say, except that one over there that runs around and makes a bit of noise, or that one over there that can't see, or that one over there that uses a wheelchair to get around. He didn't say that. He said, let all the children come to me. And it's absolutely on my heart and on many of our hearts to follow that lead and to follow that call. Jesus said, go out into all the world and make disciples of all people, and that includes children, young people with additional needs and their families. And we follow that call as heartily and as fully and as thoroughly as we possibly can.
Well, that's beautiful. Thank you, Mark. And as we conclude, what final call to action do you have for us today?
So I think my final call to action is really that one that Kieran gave us earlier on when in that first video clip, at the end of that first video clip, Kieran said, we're just like everyone else. We want to be a part of everything that's going on. Let us. And that has to be our clarion call, our signal to go out and do that. You know, for Kieran and every other child, young person, young adult with additional needs and disabilities, to include everyone, to not put barriers in their way, to take barriers down if we find them, to make sure that we journey with children, young people and families together, and make a difference for each and every one, and see the blessings that brings. But yeah, that clarion call from Kieran, we're just like everyone else. We want to be a part of everything that's going on. Let us, I think, is what hopefully will stay in all of our hearts and minds as we take this forward.
Well, thank you again, Mark, for being with us and for sharing your passion, providing us with great insights and inspiration and tools. So we'll put all the links to the websites and the different resources you've mentioned. They'll be below the video. People can find them, and along with your contact details, if people want to just connect with you and to know more and get more help.
Yeah, I would love to hear from anybody that wants to get in touch, either individually or on behalf of their church, to take this forward. I'm up for conversations and to explore what this might look like for churches that want to take that step forward, to respond to Kieran's call to us all, to let everyone be included.
Great. Well, for those who are watching this, if you find value in what has been shared today, I invite you to like this video and hit the subscribe button and the notification bell to be informed of each new video released. And let us know in the comments below what you have found most helpful or encouraging, or perhaps share a story that you've experienced with your family, with your children, your church, and ask any questions you may have for myself or for Mark. And then share the link with friends and churches who would also be helped and inspired. And together, let's impact many more lives for good across all the generations and across all the families, the forms of families that exist in our society today. Because God loves them all, and he wants us to share his love with all of them and to be all inclusive. So thank you again, and every blessing. Bye for now.